One night in the late spring of 2010, I dreamed that I saw my brother Gary in a mall in Southern California. He was dressed in casual clothing and seemed as if he was looking for a specific destination. He barely made any eye contact with me, and throughout the entirety of this dream, he never once said a word to me. I ran up to him, tried to stop him, but he never stopped moving forward. He only turned to look at me and then nodded to acknowledge he knew that I was there. Other people in the mall apparently recognized Gary also. There were elderly and children, wealthy and poor, white and black, all with their hands extended to shake his hand or to touch him in some kind of way. Some even tried to lay their hands on his shoulders, pat his back, and even asked him for his autograph, as if he were some kind of hero. One little white boy with blonde hair, a yellow t-shirt, black shorts, and black sneakers grabbed Gary's hand and said, "Thank you, sir." But Gary was all too focused on his forward progress. He kept walking until we came to a corridor where he turned to go up an escalator. So I continued to follow him. I was very interested to see where exactly was he going. When we reached the top of the escalator, I realized that the place we were in was not a mall at all, but rather it was an airport. It appeared that my brother had to take a flight that night, and he was so focused on his destination because he was late. Now, mind you, subconscious or not, my brother may be many things, but late is never one of them. You see, Gary was a staff sergeant and a drill instructor in the United States Marine Corps. After that, he spent the last 20 years as a police officer, so punctuality is priority. The fact that he was late for anything certainly had me startled. Nevertheless, like when we were kids, I ran right behind him, all the way to the top. We continued to walk until we came to another escalator, and my brother turned that way as if he was going to get on it, but this escalator only went up. I found this strange because the escalator we rode to the top on ended and offered no further escalation. I assumed that my brother and I had gone as high as we could possibly go because we could see the ceiling. Apparently I was wrong, so I asked Gary, "Don't you want to go higher?" But he never answered me a word. He walked right past the escalator to the elevator, pressed the button to go down, and took a seat on a nearby bench to wait. He was slumped over while leaning back against the rails that this bench was resting on, all the while with his head down and looking right at the floor. As I stood there trying to figure out where my brother was going, the elevator bell rang and its doors opened. Gary got up off of the bench, walked into the elevator, and turned to face me. I pleaded with him, "Get out of that elevator, or at least let me get on there with you." But with a sad face, he looked me straight in the eyes. He dropped his head again and stepped backwards against the wall of the elevator. I ran with all my might, but it was to no avail. For as soon as I reached out to my brother, it was then that the doors were shut. Immediately, I was back at our childhood home in East Cleveland, Ohio, where we grew up. I was in my and Gary's bedroom that we shared, laying in my bed, and I couldn't sleep. I remember on nights like that, I would wake Gary to keep me company or to watch over me while I slept. You see, I had a very vivid imagination, and I assumed that as soon as we turned off the lights, that monsters and ghosts would come out and get me while we were asleep. Gary would let me get in the bed with him, or he would sing one of the latest hits from the 1970s to me. He was such a hard sleeper that I would often have to hit and shake him for minutes on end before he would respond to me. So on this particular night, I looked over at his bed and saw him as usual, with cover on him from head to toe. It wasn't his regular yellow blanket. Instead, it was a plain white sheet. I called out to him, but he never gave any response at all. Even after sneaking into his bed, Gary never answered me a word. As children, we were the prototypical big brother and little brother. He was the bully, and I, of course, was his victim. So since he was sleeping so hard, I figured that this was time for some payback. As a champion wrestler, Gary would often tie me into knots until I begged him for mercy. But now, now it was my turn to tie him up until he wakes up. First, I hit him with a series of forearm shivers, then a crossface or two. And if you've ever wrestled, I'm sure you just love those. And finally, I placed him in a rear naked choke. Yeah! Oh, I let Gary have it with some of my best stuff, but nothing fazed him. He never moved. He never responded. He never woke up. I just laid there next to him. I figured, well, it's my turn now to watch over him while he sleeps. Maybe he was just worn out from his long journey from California back to East Cleveland. Maybe he'll finally talk to me when the morning comes. But it was all just wishful thinking on my part, because while laying in his bed next to him, I heard our front door close downstairs. And then I began to hear the sound of footsteps outside of our bedroom window, going away from the house. I immediately jumped out of his bed, took a look out of the window, and I wanted to see who it was that was leaving. Imagine my surprise. I could not believe what it was that I saw. It was my brother Gary walking away through our backyard. He was wearing his camouflage jacket, some faded blue jeans, some tan Timberland boots. Timberland boots, Gary? He had a clean-shaved face and no hat or gloves on, which surprised me because it was so cold until you could see his breath in the wind. He also had his green military backpack across his left shoulder and a high, tight regulation haircut. There was so much snow and frost on the ground, but Gary tread right through it as if he was on a mission. The night was giving way to the dawning of a new sunrise, and I remember hoping and praying that my big brother would be okay while making his journey. It was just at that time that I noticed a glowing campfire burning in the distance, and I thought maybe he'll stop there to get warm. But Gary looked intent on moving it right along. I looked at his bed and noticed the sheet still covering what I thought to be my brother. Then I heard the voice of a man say, "Don't worry. He's received his orders and he's going home." I looked out of our bedroom window again as Gary disappeared out into the distance. And I said to him, "I love you, big brother. Have a safe trip." He was the best big brother ever. He was my hero and my very best friend. Someday the world will say about him, "That was a great soldier who was from the army of the Lord." He was discharged just before the dawn and the breaking forth of a new day.